Like the Sontaran stratagem before it, the Poison Sky is pretty effective at accomplishing what it sets out to do. The first two-parter was always a troubled part of the Davies era, and so it feels strangely appropriate the production team should manage to nail it on the fourth and final go. The Poison Sky isn't the best episode of Series 4, but it isn't the worst either. Instead, it's a solidly entertaining feature-length adventure featuring the return of various old favourites from the classic and the revived show mashed together. It's a goofy, silly and fluffy, but it's entertaining fluff, and it has its many merits. The Sontarans are militant potatoes, an inherently absurd bunch of villains. They arguably never worked in Classic Who under any writer but their creator Robert Holmes, so the fact that Poison Sky seems to use these aliens remarkably well is a testament to just how well honed a machine the revival has become. The fact that the series doesn't try to reinvent them, or even try to scale them up as the threat posed by them, is a testament to how comfortable the revived series seems to be with reintroducing elements from the classic run. What I do like about this episode is it's the first story of the revived show to present UNIT as something resembling a competent military organisation, like the powerhouse it was in the 70s. They seem like the kind of people you could imagine making a half-decent show of protecting the planet while the Doctor is gallivanting around the universe. Rather than a footnote or an in-joke, this seems like the point at which UNIT really get their due, so the major involvement in later episodes like Turn Left and Planet of the Dead don't seem to come out of nowhere. It's some nice plotting and that should be acknowledged here. More than that though, the Sontaran stratagem and the Poison Sky almost seem like an attempt to redeem the opening two-parter, often the most obvious structural problem of the Davies seasons. Indeed, it was so troublesome that the biggest change Stephen Moffat made in the first year as showrunner was to swap the two-parters around, pushing the scary high-concept two-parter to the start of the season, with the Time of Angels and Flesh and Stone, and moving the toyetic classic monster two-parter return towards the end of the year, The Hungry Earth and Cold Blood. So the Sontaran stratagem and the Poison Sky represent one last chance for the production team to get it right. And that they do. They scale back the weight on the two-parter by allowing the Sontarans to be treated like a joke, and they ensure that the episode's emotional plotlines never overwhelm it. The other opening two-parters seem too packed for their own good, with ideas squeezing one another out and ending up undercooked or poorly thought out as a result. These two episodes are much more measured and skillfully crafted, with the ideas fitting just right. It's also worth noting that the episode also redeems Helen Raynor as writer. Raynor had been script editor for the revived show since it first came back, and the generally high quality speaks volume of her skills. This two-parter allows Raynor another shot at writing a bombastic two-parter adventure, and proves her abilities as a writer. It's vindication for Raynor, who just had a bit of misfortune the last time around with the Dalek two-parter in Series 3. Affording her a second shot at the first two-parter of the year demonstrates Davies' faith in Raynor as a writer, but also how comfortable the show seems to be at this point in time. The series is in a space of where it can comfortably gamble on affording a writer a do-over after striking out on their first two-parter. Indeed, it's remarkable how much of this two-parter sees Raynor use the same basic ingredients and story elements as their much derided earlier two-parter. Both stories feature recognisable monsters using genetic engineering and sinister experiments to help them conquer the world. Raynor even throws in elements of the Doctor's strange death wish, something that the show only ever seemed to tease rather than actually embracing head-on. Although here it is a tad more fleshed out and justified than the Dalek two-parter last series. This time his death wish just comes in an attempt to protect the entire Earth, other than just a few people in 30s Manhattan. The 10th Doctor's attempt at self-sacrifice feels a lot more in character here, sparing us a complete breakdown for a solid justification. The elements here work a lot better and feel much more fleshed out. The Sontarans don't come with the same weight of expectation as the Daleks, and the genetic experimentation is built into their concept a lot more readily than it is with the Daleks, a species defined by their hatred of all that is different, as opposed to the Sontarans, who it's not the case. I've got to give them a choice, he explains, which is much more heroic than begging the Daleks to kill you on the spot, so you don't have to see them exterminate the entire planet. It helps that it plays to Tennant's strengths as an actor. It's a big moment that he underplays, standing in marked contrast to his more extroverted antics. It helps that I've got to give them a choice is the most doctorish explanation for that scene possible, and demonstrates that the 10th Doctor, despite his tendency for arrogance and hubris, is a hero. We've come a long way from those second chances, and I think the show is better for it. The Poison Sky cleverly decides not to milk the Doctor's suicidal visit to the Sontaran ship. Like a lot of the rest of the two-parter, there's no strange sense of scale here. It's all being resolved neatly, and the episodes respect the viewer enough not to pretend that it won't be. Indeed, this episode reveals that the Doctor has always been ahead of Sontarans, and he's always known about their mole inside UNIT. Sure, he's a little stressed over sending Donna inside the Sontaran ship, but the episode never really treats the Sontarans as truly large scale as the Daleks or the Cybermen. For once there's an alien race that can be stopped by Unit Force and their brutality. Their armour seems to do little good when Unit retakes the factory, and it's worth remarking how incredibly crap their internal security really is. Apparently Sontaran doors are locked so they can only be opened with three fingers. Any three fingers. A simple lock and key mechanism would have fooled the Doctor and Donna there. Tad strange, but then the Sontarans are a bit of a joke, so this does kind of make sense. Another really key element I like that's planted here is even in the fluffy blockbuster two-parter, is the show takes care to criticise the Doctor's conduct. He's not the idolised hero riding to the rescue as much as he might like to think he is. He repeatedly stresses how uncomfortable he is around firearms, but he still needs Unit, and their guns, to help him retake the factory. After all, for all the Doctor protests about Unit's trigger-happy politics, the show draws attention to the fact that the Doctor has a habit of working with them. In fact, he's still on their books. Although I tell you what, they get them out of their rage outburst towards Colonel Mace from the Doctor is really great, and is yet another example of some damn fine acting from Tennant.
Greyhound 40, report. Greyhound 40, report.
It wasn't Greyhound 40, his name was Ross. Now listen to me. And get them out of there!
Colonel Mace was presenting as something of a stuffy military archetype in the Sontaran stratagem, but the Poison Sky is quick to suggest that he's perfectly capable of handling himself. Mace gets two crowning moments here. One involves the use of a firearm to put down a murderous psychopathic alien soldier, a moment executed with a hint of irony, suggesting that Mace's use of violence in that circumstance was far more justifiable than the Doctor would concede. Mace's second moment comes when he effectively tells the Doctor to get stuffed. As the Doctor is trying to micromanage the conversation, Mace cuts him across him. "Thank you, Doctor. Thank you for your lack of faith, but this time I'm not listening." He then reveals his own military strategy, which involves the clever use of the Valiant, and even impresses the Doctor himself. For all the Doctor moans about Mace, the episode makes it clear that the Doctor is in the wrong here. He's being pig-headed and short-sighted, and not at all cooperative or helpful, but the show acknowledges that. The Doctor comes in for a fair amount of justified criticism here. He seems to be offended by the existence of Unit, but remains an employee, even if only technically. He protests against the use of firearms, but he needs an army to get back into the factory so he can save Martha. He presumes to speak for the Earth and to make decisions on its behalf, despite refusing to keep Mace up to date on his plans and gambits. "You're not authorised to speak on behalf of the Earth," Mace protests quite rightly, considering he's been talking to a man who routinely disappears into time and space, where stuff like Children of Earth and Torchwood happens. "I've got that authority," the Doctor smugly responds. "I earned that a long time ago." He has, of course, saved the planet countless times, but there's something quite unsettling about how keen he is to assert that authority here. Indeed, this episode even finds time to foreshadow some of the Doctor's pending character arc, which lends the episode's human villain a bit more depth than he might otherwise have. Also, I like the reference to the Rutans here, namely how the Doctor references their 50,000-year war that's still ravaging throughout the galaxies. Yet another classic reference, it just feels really earned and is pretty cool. Talking of Luke Rattigan, he's a fairly two-dimensional stereotypical television boy genius here. He's selfish, disconnected, embittered, petty and jealous. It's a character type the show has done countless times in its decade-long history. Adric. I know he's meant to be annoying, but damn, he doesn't half take the bloody biscuit here. The scene when he's trying to convince his students to come with him to this new world just plays off as a bit cringy. Topped off when he pulls a gun on them. Don't forget this is supposed to be England when there are rules against these things. The whole thing just plays off as a bit funny, to be honest.
Castor 36. You're just sick.
Guess that just proves it. I'm cleverer than you. I'm cleverer than everyone, do you hear me? I'm clever!
Nevertheless, Donna's fantastic development and characterisation continues here. Her lack of bookish smarts is, again, contrasted with the Doctor, but it suggested that her emotional intelligence is far superior, and the two balance each other out really well. When she first meets Martha, the show casts her as an almost maternal figure, something that will come up again in The Doctor's Daughter. She's there to offer Martha advice and reassurance, and to pay attention to Martha's problems, even though she's come after Martha in the Doctor's timeline. When the Doctor inquires about Martha's family in the Poison Sky, he's very clearly testing his hypothesis about whether or not she's a Sontaran clone. In contrast, Donna's personal interest in Martha is much more genuine. "You know that coat? It sort of works," Donna helpfully reassures Martha after the Doctor rescues her from the factory. "I feel like a kid in my dad's clothes," Martha remarks, wearing the Doctor's trench coat. Donna observes, "Oh well, if you're calling him Dad, you're definitely getting over him." It's a nice bit of interplay. I like it. However, while I do think it's nice they brought Martha back into the fold for this two-parter, I've always been a bit unsure as to why she's kept on for the next episode. Any development with her character is done here, but I'll save my thoughts on that for the next review. Overall, the Sontaran Stratagem and the Poison Sky aren't a high point for Series 4, but they do represent the first time the opening two-parter does have the outcome the production team wanted from the outset. It's a big, fun and sprawling story featuring a memorable alien invasion that passes the time well, and the return of the Potato Boys is pretty great. It's not the stuff of great Doctor Who, but it's the stuff of entertaining Doctor Who nonetheless, and there's nothing wrong with that in the middle of a series. I give the Sontaran Stratagem and the Poison Sky a 7.
Back of the neck.